Seconds left is yours.
Okay. Hello, everyone. You're watching the Asian American Herald, which is a new media network featuring the Asian Americans in the capital region of New York. You can also watch a recording of the show and all of our previous episodes on our Facebook page, the Asian American Herald of the Capital District. My name is Shruti Natanmai, and I'm a student at the Fashion Institute of Technology, writer and creative who was born and raised in the capital region. Tonight, we're honored to speak with Azra Haqqie, a veteran journalist and staff writer since 1991 for the Albany Times Union, one of the most notable publications in the capital region. As the news and information desk coordinator, Azra frequently reports and writes Faces of Faith and Caring community columns and contributes to the Muslim Woman blog. Azra Haqqie, welcome to our show.
Thank you so much, Shruti. I'm honored to be asked, and I'm honored to be here.
Of course. So just a brief note for those of you tuning in live, please feel free to submit any questions via the chat box, and Ashok Adikopa will be monitoring the chat, and we will address your questions at the very end if time permits. Okay, so let's get started. So although we've come a very long way in regards to representation and diversity in the mainstream media, Asian Americans still remain largely underrepresented. So as a leading Asian American journalist in the capital region yourself, we're very excited to speak with you and hear your perspective. So I'd kind of like to start by asking you to take a minute to introduce yourself a bit more and tell our viewers a little bit about what exactly it is that you do and what inspired you to pursue a career in journalism.
Thank you. I was born and raised in Pakistan, and I came to the capital region in 1980 to join my husband. And it'll be 40 years next month.
Wow.
Stayed in the same city. And in the first house we bought, and we have two grown children. The older one's an engineer, the younger one's an ophthalmologist. And my husband, he was a nephrologist, a kidney doctor, and he worked at Albany Med, was a professor at the medical college, and he also served in the US Army Reserves Medical Corps. He had many peace missions. Then he had 2 tours of duty of Iraq during the wars, and then one of Afghanistan. And he was honored at the White House by President Obama.
That's incredible.
Yeah, so that was really, really an honor.
Yeah, definitely.
And I've been working, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, sorry.
I've been working at the Times Union since 1991, doing in the newsroom, so in various capacities. The job description shifts a little every so often as the newspaper evolves or certain areas of coverage change. In America, for local papers, I'm not talking national ones like New York Times or Wall Street Journal, but ones like Albany, where you focus a lot on local news. So I have been when I started, there was a whole department called the Community News Department, and I was part of that. And it focused on neighborhoods, on libraries, on senior citizen activities, student honors and achievements. We focused and profiled students who had maybe gone for a semester abroad or only for 2 weeks even.
Mm-hmm.
So we did a lot of that. And then gradually that department was merged into the main local news section. And gradually as newspaper readership began to dwindle, pages were cut, sections were cut. If you followed the Times Union through the years, you will realize it's a much smaller newspaper now than it used to be.
Right.
But yeah, I love my work. I love my coworkers. I look forward to going to work, and in every way. For me, it's been a positive experience.
That's incredible. I mean, everyone can hope for that, right? To look forward to going to work. That must be the best feeling.
Yes.
Yeah. So, what has been your experience as a Muslim woman working in journalism? Like, what makes your perspective, considering your background coming from Pakistan, different from the others?
My experience has been overall, and in particular with the newsroom, when I started, people were not very informed about Muslims or Muslim faith or Muslim customs. But once you tell them, they are very, very respectful. I remember the first year when it was Ramadan and I began fasting and I explained what it is, what it involves day to day. The editor at the time said there was going to be no eating and drinking in that department because Azra is fasting. And I was horrified. I said, no, I'm fasting. You, you don't have to punish yourselves by fasting. But I mean, very, very respectful in many ways. And after a few years, the editor then said to me, you've brought a new readership to the newspaper because you've approached different venues of the Muslim community and maybe even some Pakistani events or Indian events.
Yeah.
So that was good. The other thing is that sometimes I find people in the community will speak with me, but they do not want to speak with someone else in the newsroom. For some reason, they think that their words will be distorted. And I've repeatedly tried to say it is not so. No journalist, they may misunderstand you, but no one would knowingly misinterpret what you're saying. Another advantage I find of me being there is a couple of examples. There was this young man whose last name was Naqvi. I forget what his rank in the military was. He died in Iraq. I think he was blown up, but I don't remember. He was a local young man, and so his funeral was in Colony.
Mm-hmm.
The newspaper said, ask if they would let the reporters and photographers in. We would like to cover it because he was a Muslim and very few people are aware that Muslims serve too. So I asked and they were very open. They said, yes, the women's section is separate and we will even allow a photographer there if she is Muslim. So at the time, we had a reporter who had also gotten training for video. So we sent her to the women's section, a male photographer reporter to the other section. And I mean, again, how would they have reached out or been comfortable if they didn't have me as like a liaison? And that's happened on a number of occasions.
Right.
So that's been helpful. It's always helpful to have diversity any place, but in a newsroom, definitely so.
Yeah. And do you feel like after being at the Times Union since 1991, do you feel that people are more willing to be informed about Muslim faith and culture and just are more receptive to it?
I think they are. Every year I do the Ramadan story. And maybe, I don't know, a few years when I'd been working there and I'd done my annual Ramadan story, one of my friends took her newspaper with the Ramadan story in it and gave it to the teacher and said, well, you know, my son will be observing, or maybe not observing the fast, but observing Ramadan. So I brought this for you. The teacher said, I already read it. She said, I read it last year and the year before. So, I mean, she already knew that this is something that happens every year.
Right.
And there's regular people who seem to be more aware now.
Yeah.
And there's other things too. And then one time when I had done an article on the pilgrimage, the Hajj, that must try to observe once in a lifetime, and which is in memory of Abraham and his son, Ishmael, according to Muslims. So this woman I know called me up and she said, Azra, that was a nice article, but you got the son's name wrong. It's Isaac. And I said, that's the Jewish belief, not the Muslim belief. So you are right when you say what you say, but I am right when I wrote what I wrote. So
Yeah.
it's just nice to have a conversation. So we both learned something.
Yeah. That's always nice when there's a lot of diversity, even at work or even amongst friends. It always makes for good stories and good conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
Paper appreciates it also when we do these things, or we hear from people that the newspaper management does appreciate it.
yes. Okay, so what has been the most difficult barrier you've endured during the course of your career, even outside of the Times Union?
Well, I don't know if I would call it a barrier. Sometimes we set barriers for ourselves,
That's
especially women, because if your priority is your children and your family, and even if a position opens up, you choose not to apply for it because you know you cannot work those hours, or you know you cannot travel, or you know you're not going to be available nights, and you know you cannot depend on your husband because of his line of work. So I don't know if there were too many barriers, but I chose to stay in the position I was in. And like I said, it evolved and there were new things assigned to me. I was given trainings. So it's all good.
right. So it's more of like a mental barrier,
Yes.
like you said. Yeah.
Yes.
Do you feel like you've always had that mental barrier, like since you've had children, or has it evolved?
In my day, a woman's family came first. You could work, but you couldn't neglect your children. And over here, for someone like me who came from overseas, there was no support system.
Mhm.
I tell my mother, who didn't live here, to watch the kids because I have to work at night, or tell my sister-in-law, can you cook dinner tonight because I will not be available. So you know what you have to do, so you know what you cannot do. And nowadays, I find young women are more open to careers, and the husbands are more open also to helping out or taking on the responsibility, which in that generation, the men did not.
Right.
So the women are able to move more into positions than people in my generation did.
Right. Yeah. Right. That's great.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. I think that mental barrier, even for some people, is still present, whether it be because of familial obligations or just that feeling that they shouldn't devote that much time to a career as opposed to something else. I think that's still very much relevant. Okay, so how has the ongoing pandemic tested you as a journalist? And how has it changed your outlook on the role of journalists and your place as a journalist?
That's an excellent question, because the pandemic, it happened overnight pretty much. We were just told we have to work from home. Our IT department had to, in a flash, set us all up with those virtual personal networks and connections. And as we muddled through it, they had to talk us on how to resolve issues. And I think everyone pounced in the newsroom. We did what had to be done. I think the medical reporter rose to the occasion, and she took the brunt of it.
Mm-hmm.
Also local, like the Albany reporter handling the local coronavirus briefings from Dan McCoy, or covering the nursing home deaths as they rose. And a newspaper tries to cover every angle, and our four major counties here, Albany, Rensselaer, Saratoga, and Schenectady. And then we also realized that there are people, there's the news of what's happening, but then there are also people who are rising to the occasion. Of course, the frontline workers were the medical people, but then suddenly the guy who's going to bring your groceries to your house from Walmart is also now a frontline worker.
Right.
The fact that the mail carrier is delivering your mail every day to keep some semblance of normalcy is also a frontline worker. The newspaper carrier keeps my day going with the routine I got used to. The newspaper is there. So suddenly we have all these people. And then let's not forget all the people who are now suddenly needing to provide food for people who were living paycheck to paycheck and suddenly find themselves needing to decide between paying for groceries or paying that internet bill so the kid can stay connected to school.
Right.
So all the volunteers, I mean, no church or no regional bank, food bank can do it alone. They have tons of volunteers who help. There's so many organizations that are cooking and delivering meals to mostly elders who are shut-ins, but maybe also to others. And there's groups from time to time who will, as a thank you, deliver meals to teachers or others as a thank you. And now there's all these creative ways of delivering the message to graduates that they've graduated by
Yes.
placing signs or delivering them in their mailbox and tooting horns or
Yeah.
celebrating 100-year-olds with parades. Or so it's all those things, and we try to cover as many as we can. And I think it's wonderful. And I think people have turned more and more to news, both on TV and the newspapers. I think our online readership is going up.
Mhm.
So I think thanks to technology, in this age of the pandemic, the newspapers have done great.
Yeah, I know. And everyone's definitely making an incredible sacrifice, but I think, as you said, it's very inspiring and great to see people being so creative during a time when a lot of people didn't think that possible. So I think that's great. Just the other day, I saw a birthday party for a Sweet 16 or something, and everyone was honking their horns with balloons on the cars. And it was just 2 months ago, if someone said that was going to happen, I wouldn't have believed it. But it's incredible how creative.
It meant so much to that kid or to the
Yeah.
100-year-old, because it was probably even more of a celebration than if
Right.
in normal. They would have had cake and balloons and a picture, but
Yes, I know.
it's the fire truck and the police and
Yes.
more people, and
Yeah.
yeah,
They definitely won't forget it.
definitely risen to the occasion, all these
Yes.
organizations, definitely.
So, as a veteran journalist, what kind of need do you see for the Asian American Herald, which is a very small upstart platform in the capital region, but how do you feel the platform would fill a gap in the local media scene, or if there is a gap in the local media scene?
First of all, I love the name, Asian American Herald. I do. I really loved it.
Thank you.
And I think there's always a need for niche groups, because they understand the needs or the need to share the news or publicize the news that maybe mainstream media does not. But having said that, I think also the Asian Americans can learn to, did I lose you?
I know. Yeah.
Can learn to little bit more be outgoing and reach out and maybe write a letter to the editor. And it doesn't have to be about Asian Pacific Islanders. It can be about that big hole in the road that left over from the winter storm and the Department of Public Works or DOT hasn't gotten around to repairing. And these days, there's so many letters to the editor coming in on various coronavirus related topics. Maybe someone could write one.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be nice to have them on some kind of a schedule. If you have, say, 12 people, one could write it once a month.
Yeah.
And if even half of them were selected for publication, your name is out there. And if they identify with your organization, that would be good too. So that's one way. And they can also, like I talked about earlier, community news. If they do something, if they're in Boy Scouts and they do an Eagle Scout project, they could send in a picture and information to the local media. If they make, if they're doing something these days to help people affected by the lockdown, it doesn't even have to be directly by the COVID-19. They can share that. Right. Those are different ways of trying to get your word into the mainstream media. If they're looking to study journalism, they could ask if they could shadow a journalist for a day. There used to be internships. I think those went on hold, but if there are, you could ask to apply for an internship in the local paper. I think the local TV channels used to have it. There are different ways if someone wants to pursue journalism.
Yeah. Do you feel that Asian Americans in the capital region or even beyond the capital region are not represented enough in news stories?
I think they are a little underrepresented, but like I said earlier, that maybe they're not reaching out. Many of the story ideas we get are from people who contact us.
Right.
So if you're from a background where you're shy to toot your own horn or to promote something you've done, and if no one lets the mainstream media know, there is no way for you to be represented, and therefore, yes, you will be underrepresented.
Right. That's an excellent point. Yeah. So speaking of this lockdown, how are you occupying yourself while social distancing?
Well, people ask me that, and I say my life has not changed that much. Okay. My hours are pretty much the same. I keep my same routine, get up that same time, make my bed, shower, have breakfast, open my office. And at the end of the day, because I'm working off of a laptop on the dining room table, my neck, my shoulders, my back, everything hurts. So I do some stretches. Every day I call or email someone every day because there's no one at home now. The kids are in different cities. My husband died 4 years ago.
I'm very sorry.
So I have no human being at home. And I've chosen to self-isolate, so I'm not even going out regularly for groceries or anything. So I'm out maybe once every 2 weeks or thereabouts. And I haven't too much gotten into the art scene. I know there's a lot of it going on. You can do it. I have toured a couple of museums and things virtually.
Yeah.
Those are great.
And the Tulip Festival, there's a virtual tour, right?
Yeah, I missed that. I'm hoping I can get back on and somehow see it late. But it's also Ramadan, so I'm trying to, all the mosques and Islamic centers had to close down. So we missed the social component of community iftars, the dinner at sunset, or the community prayers. So those are all. So they try to put something online, like a sermon or some recitation of the Quran or some brief sermon. So I try to listen to something of that locally or something from the nationally known speakers. I try to read my book. I do reading Nelson Mandela's Long Walk to Freedom, and that is a pretty chubby book.
Yes.
And
yes, it is pretty chubby.
Yeah. So every weekend I'm baking something.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah. Today I made a citrus avocado olive oil cake.
That sounds really good.
It is good, and it's healthy as cakes go.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Avocado, orange, eggs, and I use less flour than the recipe calls for.
Yeah.
No?
That
Oh,
sounds good to me. Yeah. I've been baking too much. There's too much of that going around.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's
It's good to keep a routine though. I feel like that's
for me it's important. I know some people say, well, they just roll out of bed in their pajamas and start working. I don't do that. I do get dressed
yeah.
to some extent.
Yeah. I dabble on both sides.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Whatever
Yeah.
works for each person.
Yeah.
For me, I do get dressed.
Mm-hmm.
And so also I find I'm very hurt by seeing the people suffering. When I see the long lines of people for food giveaways, and I realize, and they all look like they're doing okay otherwise, I mean, they have nice cars, so obviously they expected to be making enough money to keep the car payments going.
Right.
And now they're hurting so much. So I just try to donate or whatever I can, especially to the organizations that provide food, because I think feeding is probably number one right now. Later on, we'll have other issues to deal with, but people have to eat.
Right.
And, it is Ramadan, so I do pray. I do pray for the people who are suffering from the virus, for people who are suffering because their conditions had to go on hold because the hospitals could only cater to COVID-19 patients and emergencies like heart attacks. And then what's going to happen when we open, when the state opens? What will happen to all the businesses who may not be able to go back and float again?
Yeah, that's the big question.
Yeah. So I
Yeah.
do pray for them.
Yeah. Thank you. So, okay, so we're running a little close to the end. So I just have one final question for you. So what final thoughts would you like to offer our listeners during this rather unique time? Like, do you have any insight into how Asians who reside in the capital region could play a more active part in their community?
I think this has been the hardest for children and for the older people because there's been nothing like this that you could relate to, and you can't tell them when it'll be over.
Right.
And they need to know that, but there's no way to give them a date. Mm-hmm. Children on my street have painted pictures of rainbows and put them on their windows, which is nice. If you can do that, maybe that'll help the children. Other than that, I would really say if people can hang in there, do whatever they can, if they're in good health and they can volunteer to some extent, maybe ask the neighbor, if you're going out, can I pick you up something from Stewart's? Do you need milk, eggs? If you're not in good health, please don't ask anyone because you shouldn't be going out, leave alone bringing things to others.
Right.
If you are fortunate enough to have a few bucks at the end of the day, maybe you can contribute to someone who could need it more than you. Mm-hmm. And if you have any way of contributing by means of the arts, there are people who seem to, I watch on the evening news, they stand outside on their doorstep and play a musical instrument if they know how. Or there's this guy who sings the Star Spangled Banner every day and the neighbors just gather and put their hands on their hearts. Anything, if you can, to in some way socially distanced, bring people closer because people need that in this very difficult time.
Definitely. Thank you. That's great advice. And
thank you.
Loved speaking with you and hearing all your thoughts about the community and your experience. Also, I'd like to say Happy Mother's Day to you and all the mothers and mother figures listening in right now. So thank you and everyone for joining us this evening for what has been our 5th Asian American Herald show. I am Shruti Natanwai, and our wonderful guest for today was Azra Haqqie.
Oh,
Asian
thank you.
American, of course. The Asian American Herald is a Facebook-based news media outlet dedicated to discussing topics and building community amongst the Asian Americans in the capital region. Please send us your story ideas and look for this recording and all the other recordings on our Facebook page. And have a good evening.
Thank you.
Of course. Thank you so much for coming.